Welcome back, Proximians, to Terra Proxima, the show where I, a 16-year-old Central Proximian with nothing better to do, discuss the history of our ancestors, the humans. The time has finally come to prove our worthiness and talk about life on Proxima Centauri. The structure of our planet is much less interesting than that of the humans. We'll have to admit that. Humans had vast oceans filled with fish and plastic and flourishing landscapes that they later ruined via pollution. We do not have these vast oceans, but we do have water. That's mostly thanks to humans sending water along with those bacteria that grew our species. We could take that water, which wasn't a lot, inspect its chemical composition and construct more ourselves. In the future, scientists even plan to construct an artificial weather system. Humans had cool weather, it rained, where there were lightning strikes, it snowed, there were storms, we'd prefer not to have those, and so much more fun stuff. Proxima Centauri b, the planet we're talking about today, does have an atmosphere. Humans never really figured that out because they didn't yet know how to determine the atmospheric compositions of distant planets. Our atmosphere is not filled with oxygen, a primary part of life. So how do we survive? If you're asking yourself that question, then I have serious questions about how you're even alive. When the bacteria sent over by the humans reached Proxima Centauri b, things were looking bad. Some bacteria were immediately dying when they left the oxygen-filled container they were sent in. This is because not all bacteria can survive in anaerobic conditions. Luckily for us, most bacteria can survive in environments without any oxygen. It took thousands, possibly millions of years for bacteria cells, and at this point there were like trillions of them around, to mutate into the first signs and forms of animal cells like we saw in humans. This took so long because at one point, mutational evolution of the bacteria reached a halt. Every new mutation immediately died because it mutated with a part of the cell that required oxygen to survive. While this is what we need to form the first signs of life, it's not going to survive in the non-oxygen providing landscape that is Proxima Centauri b. After a while, some of the bacteria spread into underground caverns formed by meteor hits from the past. These caverns contained certain chemical compounds left behind by the meteor's impact, which allowed the bacteria cells to survive for longer underground. After 3 million years, the first cell with a special new organ was born. This cell could convert carbon dioxide into oxygen while leaving behind carbon as a toxic gas. The toxic gas wasn't much of an issue for the cells, however, so they left it behind until it became a problem for the life forms that looked more like humans a couple of million years later. These life forms still had that special cell organ, but they started to face some issues caused by the toxic amounts of carbon gas around them. Domes were a necessary addition to help us survive. I am reading the script from a dome right now, because without it I wouldn't be able to breathe for long. Now, I know I've rambled on for minutes about how humans took terrible care of their planet by emitting too much toxic gas that would eventually cause the planet to warm up, but I have to admit that we also made a similar mistake. On one hand, these special cell organs saved our lives, but on the other hand it polluted the air with tons of carbon gas that can't escape the atmosphere due to its polar composition. Carbon in and of itself is an apolar molecule after all. The first dome was constructed 50,000 years ago. This ancient dome is still standing and currently houses all of the government buildings for Central Proxima, which is the capital of our planet. Unlike humans, we do not divide our planet into countries. Everyone lives by the same rules and the same government, although there are still cultural differences all around the world, the same for languages. A regular dome is about 1 kilo Chicxulub in diameter. It cannot be much larger because it would collapse in on itself in a matter of seconds. Each dome has 4 holes in the cardinal directions. These holes can be opened and closed with an airlock system to prevent any carbon from getting in. Other domes can be connected via these 4 holes to form a vast network of connected half-spheres. In our research, we found that the humans were planning the same construction for when they would start colonizing other planets. Sadly for them, they only had time to show off their genius invention in science fiction movies. I already told you that there are no countries on Proxima Centauri b, which is very much true. Instead, people here have come to divide the planet into sections based on culture and language. These sections, though, are separate from any part of the government and they do not differ in law enforcement or wealth. There are 5 official languages spoken on Proxima Centauri b. All 5 of these languages are regarded as official by Terra Proxima, the name of the capital which I'll also be using to refer to the government, because they are spoken by a lot of people. The most popular language is still English. I bet most of you didn't even know we got this language together with its Latin alphabet from the humans. We take that for granted sometimes, you know, a well-constructed language, for the most part, just being put in front of us on a porcelain platter like that. We've got to be grateful, really grateful. The second official language, and I'm covering this in order of speakers, is Ypsilon. It uses the same alphabet as English, the Latin alphabet with its 26 letters from A to Z you learn in school. Ypsilon was invented almost 30,000 years ago, when some guy thought the English language just wasn't really that good. The language was created with the excuse that modern languages like English contained too many exceptions and rules. Keeping it simple was the main objective of its creation. That's why the entire language can be explained in only 30 pages. It shouldn't take anybody longer than a month to get the hang of the entire thing. Fun fact for you, the language was originally going to be named after its creator, but Ypsilon sounded way better and it better fit the heavy usage of the letter Y. The third official language is Modified Ypsilon. I have absolutely no idea why people found it necessary to further modify a language that is already so perfect, but here we are. Modified Ypsilon takes everything great about Ypsilon and dies it down by getting rid of the base of the language, the case structure. Instead, they opted for a similar system to English, where words don't have a gender, there are no nominatives or accusatives, and it turned out to be a conjuncted mess of English and Ypsilon. Kind of as if they were thrown together in a blender, or as if they had intercourse. The fourth official language is Hand language. Hand language was invented by the stubborn folks over at Proxima Rebella as a fight against the government, who, at the time, were increasing taxes because there were massive costs due to a carbon leak in a central dome. To rebel against the government, they opted not to use their mouths, but their hands to communicate. It started as a small movement, but after a while the government gave in to the pressure and lowered the taxes, opting instead to just print some more money. The final official language that really shouldn't be an official language because I've never met anyone who speaks it is Rurian. Rurian is the most complex language on this list. It was first invented some 2,000 years ago by the Terra Proxima government to keep secrets in a special language only for themselves. 500 years ago an event took place that would go down in the history books. The Rurian spill was a government leak that gave every citizen access to the government documents written in Rurian. Some scientists, mostly those who didn't like what the government was doing, got together to decipher the language in its entirety. They succeeded and approached the government with the information they gathered from the translations. Terra Proxima tried to suggest that the translations were wrong, but the proof was there and it was not looking so great. On that note, it's safe to say that people here are quite stubborn. If the government goes a little too far, the people will always find a way to stop them from doing so, whether it's inventing a non-spoken language or deciphering a language that the government themselves invented. Finally, let's talk a bit about the anatomy of a human and compare that to the anatomy of a proximian. Beginning with the human body, it starts with 2 feet. These are near flat, long parts of the body with smaller parts called toes at the end. Humans used feet to move around. They had to carry the weight of the entire body. Above the feet were legs. They could be bent in the middle where the knee is and gave a sturdy base for the rest of the body. After that, both legs were connected by a torso, a large rectangular shape. At both ends of this torso there were arms. They could also be bent in the middle like legs, and humans used these to pick things up. Finally, the head was connected to the torso via a neck. The head is by far the most important part of a human. It houses the brain, eyes, mouth, nose and ears of the human. Proximian people look similar but differ in major areas. We have paddles for feet. Paddles are circular, sticky parts that then smoothly transition into our thinner legs. We can bend our legs in 3 different places. This allows for more movement and rotation as well as more precision when bending over. It also makes it harder for a child to learn how to walk. After that comes a regular torso, the same width as the legs, just like humans. Finally, we have 4 arms, not 2. 2 arms come out on either side of the torso, one at the top and one near the middle. The head of a proximian is almost perfectly spherical and no neck connected to the torso. This last change means that head rotation is limited in comparison to humans. This comparison shows that both humans and proximians have positive and negative parts to their anatomy. The internal anatomy of a proximian is 98.7% identical to that of a human, according to recent studies done by comparing a deceased proximian to a human we found on a spaceship orbiting Earth. With that, I would like to end off episode 2 of Terra Proxima. I never really expected this series to gain such popularity, and I really only planned 2 episodes, but look where we are now. Let's keep going for a few more episodes, shall we?